Alright, so now that you're done with the first part of this course, which was about HTML, let's move on to the second part of the course, which will tackle the topic of CSS. Alright, so the latest version of CSS is almost similar to the previous ones, except for some properties and functionalities. So, the only difference is that whenever a new version is updated, some properties and functionalities are added. Alright, so let's now talk about how CSS can be used to design websites. So first things first, what is CSS3? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and we can guess by its name that it's used to define the style of a website. It displays HTML elements or documents on a screen, paper, or through other media. It saves our time and helps us control the layout of multiple web pages at once. Moreover, there are many file formats in CSS, but we mostly use external style sheets in which we can store our CSS files. Alright, so that's how basically it works. CSS is for the design. As I said previously, HTML is the bones, and CSS is to give your website like the final touches, this beauty that one feels when scrolling through the website. Alright, and now on to the next lecture. Okay, so let's now talk about the syntax of CSS. It consists of a selector, properties, and their corresponding values. So for example, we have H1, we open the curly brackets, color, colon, blue, semicolon, font size, colon, 20 pixels, semicolon, and we close the brackets. So the HTML element here is H1, and that is the selector. Then we will add two properties, as you can see in front of you. So the properties that we're talking about in this case are color and font size. So that's how we do it. We will assign a value to each property. Let's say the color is blue and the font size is 20 pixels. All the properties that we use are known as declarations, which are separated by a semicolon. And yeah, so that's how it basically works. And now on to the next lecture. Alright, so I'm now in my VS Code, and as you can see in front of you, I've created a sample website for a hospital. So you can see that it's written in HTML code and that no CSS file is included whatsoever. In fact, I've created the CSS file externally because whenever we are working on a large project, we have to create an external file. It's better to separate your CSS if you're working on a big project. Like this, you have like the distinction, and you can see your HTML on one side, your CSS on the other side, and if you need to give, to make like some necessary changes, then you have all your CSS in one single file. So yeah, basically it makes things more structured and organized. That's why we do it. Okay, so let me click on this tab, and here you go. This is my CSS file. You can see that I've written all the properties here, as well as some selectors of CSS. So the goal of this lecture is to show you the difference between CSS and HTML. Alright, so let's now copy the path of this file and paste the link into the browser. This is what the website looks like. I've used HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap in this case. If you don't know about Bootstrap, do not worry. You will learn about it in the future on your web development journey if you decide to dive in deeper into all of the web development frameworks and coding that you can do. So yeah, you will learn about it later, if you're interested. But yeah, don't worry about it. Just keep in mind for now that it's simply a free and open source CSS framework. directed at responsive front-end web development. So if you wanna quickly build a page, you can use a Bootstrap for front end. It really helps you to build things and set them up very quickly. All right, so now let me remove the CSS and Bootstrap files and see how the website looks like. Okay, so in VS Code, I'll press Ctrl+A to select everything, and then I delete everything inside this CSS file. I save it. I'll also remove all the CTN links, so we'll talk about them later. Let's go back to our browser and check how the website looks like with just the HTML code. So I'll refresh the page with F5, and here you go. Our website is now a complete mess. Actually, it's not that much of a mess. It's just that the design is awful. It's like the design was altered actually. Like the layout of the website has been completely changed because, we're just using the HTML. Okay, so yeah, that's what you see in front of you, a totally messed up website. It's actually the same content as before, but without a proper design. And that's exactly why we need to use CSS alongside HTML. It's exactly why we need CSS. Because a website or a page with just HTML is terribly ugly. It's not professional. I mean, it looks like a website from the 90s, and yeah, we need CSS to make it more professional, to make it good looking, and yeah, to design it very well. All right, so I hope you now understand the main purpose of CSS. And that being said, let's now move on to the next lecture and talk about the different types of CSS. All right, and now on to the next one. Okay, so let's now explore the different types of CSS. There are basically three types of CSS. The first one is the external CSS, the second one is the internal CSS, and the third one is the inline CSS. So we mostly use external CSS, which is similar to internal CSS. Now, when it comes to inline CSS, it uses the style attribute and saves our time by directly adding the style in the HTML tag instead of using a selector. So let's go to VS Code and see how all of this works practically. Alright, so here I am in VS Code. I'll first open the CSS folder, which I created before. And now we will create an index file with the name of index.html. Firstly, I'll create a document with inline CSS. I'll use the title tag to write the title, Introduction to CSS. And then I'll use an h1 tag and I'll write hello world. I'll save it and I check the result in the browser. Here you go. We have our output. Okay, so now I'll use some properties to style the text. I'll write the text color as aqua and the background color as green. So I go back to my browser, I refresh the page, and here you go, you can see the result. So the difference between HTML and CSS is that in HTML we have to use various attributes, but in CSS we only have to write the style and the properties. As I said before, inline CSS is used when we want to work quickly. When we want the work to be done quickly, we use inline CSS. If you're just testing things and want to check out how it works in a very fast manner, then you use inline CSS. Alright, so let's now talk about internal CSS. To do internal CSS, I'll first need to add the style tags here in the head tag. Okay, then I add an h2 tag here in the body. I'll write some text in it. Let's say hello world for h2. I save it. Then I'll use the h2 selector. I assign the text color and the background color to it. I choose green, yellow for the text color and honey dew for the background color, so I'll save it now. And in VS Code, you can see that if you put your mouse over there, you can select any color shade you want. So we'll also talk about RGB in the next lesson. Alright, so for now, I go to my browser, I refresh the page, and here you go. We can see the result right in front of us. Okay, so we saw inline CSS and internal CSS. Let's now move on and talk about external CSS. So as discussed before, external CSS is used for larger projects, like a website. Like if we have a website of 2 to 3 pages, then of course it's much better and much more convenient, and it's more ergonomic. It's more from a management perspective, it's much more convenient to use the external CSS. All right, so developers, they mostly use external CSS because it's much easier for them to manage it if it was an external CSS rather than other types of CSS. All right, so let's now create a separate file, as you cannot use so many properties in inline or internal CSS, and the process is very lengthy, so that's why we'll create a separate file now. We'll create a file with the name of style.css. You can see that both files are separate and they have different icons. Okay, so now I'm in my HTML file. Let me add an h3 file here and write some text in it. So let's say, hey, how are you? And then I save it. So now I go to the CSS file. I use the h3 selector in the CSS file. Okay, so let me quickly explain the main purpose of a selector. So as we're designing HTML content with CSS, we have to choose the tag that we're selecting. You can see here that I've selected the h3 element in this external CSS sheet. Okay, so now I'll assign the color as green and the background color as yellow. I'll save it and we check the results in front of us. As you can see, the CSS file haven't run successfully. Our output is just showing the HTML output. There is no design whatsoever, so no design at all applied to this output, which is not good. So let's see, why is this happening? Okay, so it's simply because I haven't connected my HTML file to CSS external style sheet. And as a consequence, the browser cannot understand the instructions. And that's why it happened. So it simply didn't apply the CSS properties on my HTML content. Another thing that you need to keep in mind, so you need to remember that our CSS and HTML files are not in separate folders. So the problem doesn't stem from folder organization. All right, so let me show you how we can solve this issue and link our HTML and CSS files. So all you need to do is use a link tag to link both files. Here, I need to specify which CSS file I'm referring to. I'll write style.css as a source. I save it, and here you go. Problem solved. As you can see, our CSS file is now working, which is perfect. All right, so in summary, whenever you're dealing with an external CSS sheet, just remember to link the HTML and CSS files. All right, folks, so we covered many important concepts in this lecture. I hope it's all crystal clear to you now. And now on to the next lecture. Alright, so what are CSS selectors? CSS selectors are used to select HTML elements. For example, if I want to select the h1 tag, I can use CSS selectors. So CSS selectors are usually divided into 5 categories. The first category is the simple selector. It's used to select the tags. Based on the type of element, like class or ID. With simple selectors, we can, for example, select tags like h1, h2, paragraph tag, the div tag, and so on. Next, we have the combinator selectors. So they have unique names and they select elements based on the relationship between them. Next, we have the pseudo class selectors. So they are advanced selectors and select elements based on a certain state. So we'll discuss them later in the lesson. Number 4, we have pseudo elements selectors. So they select and style a part of an element. Number 5, attribute selectors. So that's the 5th one. Attribute selectors. They select elements based on an attribute or its value. So we'll talk about all these selectors later in the course. Do not worry about it for now. Alright, let's now talk about CSS colors. So I previously showed you how you can give a color to any text. These colors are classified as RGB, hex, HSL, and RGBA. So we mostly use RGB and RGBA and hex. HSL is not common because most people do not have any knowledge about it. So I'll also use for now just the RGB, RGBA, and hex. Okay, so let's have a practical look at all of this in our VS Code. Okay, so we created an internal and external CSS file in the previous lesson. I'll delete this and save it. I'll keep the external style sheet because we might need it later. So, alright, now I'll use the P tag. I write lorem in it. And here you go, we have our sample paragraph. Then I'll use the style tag, which is mostly used in inline CSS. I'll write P and then I create my curly brackets. Now I'll use the color property and write hot pink. I'll copy the file and paste it into the browser. Now take a look at the results. Our text is indeed in pink color, which is perfect. And yeah, that's what we expected basically. Okay, so let's go back to VS Code. I'll write a P tag again and write lorem in it. I'll save it and check the result in the browser. And as you can see, the result is the same. So now I'll write P times 100. This means that I'm writing the paragraph tag 100 times. I'll write some text in it and show you the results. So here you go. As you can see, the result is the same as previously because I used the simple selector. So whenever we use the simple selector, it will be applied on all P tags. So basically, if I use if I use 100 P tags on my website, the same color will be applied to all of the tags. Now, if you want to have different texts and background colors for each tag, we will use ID and class to do it. Okay, so let me use the class element here, write para1 in it and save it. Please make sure to write all the coding within the style tags. Okay, so I'll add some space here and put a dot to specify the class. Now I write the class name para1. Then I open my curly brackets here. Alright, so I'll use the color property and choose indigo. Okay, so now you'll notice that the color of the first paragraph has changed to indigo and that the rest of the paragraphs are still not they are still in hot pink color. So the other ones are still in hot pink color. And the one I specified is in indigo. Okay, so the first paragraph now has an indigo color, while all the others stayed like before, like previously. They remained the same, basically. Okay, so now I'll use the ID element. I write para2 in it, and I save it. Also, I need to write hashtag para2 here, and I choose the khaki color. I'll save it, and you can see that the color is now different. Alright, so now focus on what I'm saying. Whenever we use a simple selector with an element tag, it will be applied on all paragraphs. However, if we use the class tag, the property will just be applied on elements of a certain class. So that's a very crucial component that you need to keep in mind. I'll repeat. So whenever we use a simple selector with an element tag, it will be applied on all paragraphs. However, if we use the class tag, the property will just be applied on elements of a certain class. Alright, now, when it comes to the paragraph with the ID tag, it has nearly the same property as a class. So you may wonder, like, what's the difference? What's the difference between ID and class? The only difference is that the ID is unique in a page and can only apply to at most one element. At most one element. One single element. While the class, like in a classroom, we have many students. And here we have the same meaning. We're talking about a class. So, which means like we have many elements. Alright, so we said the ID is unique in a page and can only apply to at most one element, while the class selector can apply to multiple elements. Alright, now I'll add here the background color, which is lime green, and you can see the results. So let me tell you one thing about these white spaces that are appearing here. So to remove them, we'll use a star selector, also called a universal selector, and this will affect the entire page. Okay, so I'll give a value of 0 here to the margin and padding. We'll discuss these terms in the upcoming lectures, don't worry for now. Okay, so I saved the file, and as you can see, the spaces have been removed. Alright, so the remaining selectors will be discussed later. The selectors that we talked about in this lecture were the most common ones. So I wanted to discuss them first. Alright, that's pretty much it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Okay, so in this lecture we'll discuss the use of background in CSS. We can add images, colors, and videos to the background. So here are the different background properties: background color, background image, background repeat, background attachment, background position, background size. These properties are used to help with the design of the website. So let's have a look at it in VS Code. So first of all, I'll use the div tag, which is used for divisions between different sections of tags. I'll write lorem inside the div tag and save it. Then I add the style tag here, and I use a selector. So right now I'm using the element selector because I don't need more tags. However, if you want to add more tags, then we'll use the class or the ID for that. Okay, so now I'll write the background color, let's say lime green. I'll paste the link in the browser. And here you go, we have our output. Next, let's use the universal selector to reduce the margin and padding to 0. And here you go. We have it in front of us. Alright, so let's move on. So here, as you can see, I've picked an image with the name drop.jpg. So I'll write image here, I give the source, then I'll write, so alt equals pick, I save it, and here you go, we can see the image in our browser. If I want to increase the height and width of this image or adjust it, I will use the image selector to give it a width of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels. Alright, now if I want to adjust the width and height of the image, I'll go here, I select the image, and then I'll write the width, let's say 100%, and the height, which is 100 VH. Okay, so VH refers to viewport height, which means that it will cover the height according to the size of the screen. Okay, and as you can see in front of you, the image is covering the whole screen. Okay, so there is no place for text to be inserted in this tag. In fact, we cannot insert any text in this tag. However, if we insert the image using a background image property instead, we can assign to it some properties and insert text as well. Let me show you how it works. So I delete this part, then I use here a div tag alongside the selector in the style tag. Okay, so I can add here background dash image colon URL open brackets drop.jpg, so I save it. And as you can see, the image is not displaying in the browser since we haven't specified the width and the height. Alright, so let me fix this right now, like right away. I'll fix it. Okay, first of all, I write width colon 100%. And let me tell you one more thing. So here we have like different values such as Vmax, Vmin, VW, REM. However, we mostly use PX, EM, and REM. So PX refers to pixels, which are small dots combined to form an image. For example, if I'm writing 100 pixels here, it means that we're covering 100 dots. Moreover, you can keep in mind that 1 REM is equal to 70 pixels. Now I'll write width equals 700 pixels and height equals 300 pixels. Then I go to my browser and check the output. And as you can see, the height is fixed. Okay, then I make this window smaller. And as you can see in front of you, we have a scroll bar that appeared, which means that the website is not responsive. So what is a non-responsive website? What is a non-responsive website? In simple terms, a non-responsive website often fails to translate content efficiently from one device to another. So it fails to, display content for us in an efficient manner across devices, across different devices. So it could totally be messed up, for example, on a smartphone, but it could show correctly on your browser, on your computer, on the browser of your computer. For example, it shows in a correct manner. It displays the website in a correct manner. But if you try to open the website on your smartphone, for example, it could be totally messed up. And that's what we call a non-responsive website, because it doesn't adapt to different devices and screens. All right, so next I'll change the width and give a percentage to it. Let's say 100%. And the height will be 100 VH. So you can also write VW. Can you clearly see what I'm doing now? So the image has some fixed dimensions. However, I specified that width, like 100%. So if there is too much space left, the picture will repeat itself until it fills out all the available space. So when it repeats itself like this, it will cover 100% of the space available for the width. When it comes to the height, we fixed it to 100 VH. Okay, so now if I want to control this repetition process, I can use a property known as background dash repeat. So I'll write here background repeat, no repeat. When you use this option, the picture will not repeat. Next, I write background repeat X, and here you go. We controlled the repetition process by making the image repeat only alongside the X-axis, like it only repeats along the X-axis. In a similar manner, if I write repeat Y, the image will repeat along the Y-axis. Okay, so this is not that useful actually, so we need the no repeat. I'll use no repeat, and here you go. As you can see, it's been fixed here. Now it's 100%, and this is responsive as well. So now, as you can see, the scroll bar is not appearing. This has taken 100%, but it's not fitting on my screen, which means that it's not appearing like 100%, but it is responsive as we are making it smaller. So the scroll bar is not appearing. Like if we make it smaller, we don't have any scroll bar, which means that it's responding to different screen sizes. Okay, so now we want to fit in like we want to fit it in on the whole screen. So for that, like to do it, we'll write background size, and it will be covered. It will be like like background size, and we'll put like cover here. So these are two properties. One is covered and the other is contained. Contain is for blog posts, and cover is used when you have to fix an image on the whole website. Okay, so now I refresh it, and as you can see, the image quality has been little damaged, and it's a little zoomed in as well. So I want to increase its width and height, but the size should remain like this by default. So to do that, we use the property of background dash position, which means what should be its position, like we're indicating the position. Okay, so we have two properties in the background position, center. Okay, first center is the first one, like the first center is defining the x-axis, and the second center is defining the y-axis. So you can write top, left, right, or anything. Okay, but I wanna have an image in the center of the y and x axis, so I write center, and my image is responsive as well. So what is the role of background position? Let's see. Now I'll comment on it, so I'll comment it. And as you can see, like when I decrease the size of my image, so the image is cut out in half because I didn't specify its position. So now I'm specifying its position, and as you can see, our image is in the center and is fixed to the screen. So you can change it as well. I'm doing top and center. It means that the x-axis should be on top and the y-axis should be in the center. So now, as you can see, you can use anything here. I'm using the right. I save it, and now as you can see, it's the same. So you can check this by using different properties. Okay. Now let's talk about background attachment. So it usually has two properties, scroll and fixed. Whenever we use the fixed property, the image displayed on the website is fixed and does not change its place if we scroll. Okay, so now I'll use the p tag and write 1000 words in the lorem. Okay, so now let me go to the body. I'll add here some p tags, and I write 1000 words inside these tags. So basically I just have to write lorem 1000, and I'll save it. Let's check the results, and here you go. Take a look at this. Now as I'm scrolling down, the image is displaying on the screen, but I haven't used the fixed property yet. So I'll go back and write background attachment fixed. I'll save it, and you can see the results. Now, one last thing is that we can also add text to the background image. So first I'll write H1 here, then I write hello, this is the background. I save it. I check the result in the browser, and here we go. We have our output. We'll also learn about alignment later in the lesson. Alright folks, so that's pretty much it for this lecture. I hope that all the background properties are now super clear to you. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for now. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's now talk about CSS borders. So borders are usually used to specify the area around elements. In HTML, as we saw previously, it's possible to give colors to borders. However, in CSS, we can specify the width, height, and style of the border using different properties like dotted, dashed, solid, and so on. The most used border style is solid. All the others are just used for additional designs. They are not that common. So depending on the user's taste, they can choose any border they want, basically. Alright, let me show you how the different borders look like. The dotted border looks like this. The double border has double lines, and the others have different designs. The mixed border mixes all border types: dotted, dashed, solid, and double. Okay, so here is the border property shortcut that you should use. First, we have to specify the width, then the style, and lastly, the color. So let's have a practical look at it in VS Code. Okay, so here I've used the universal selector because we need to remove the margin and the padding. As you can see, I gave a value of 0 to the margin and a value of 0 to the padding. Alright, so I then use the h1 tag in the body here and write hello world, and I save the file. So after that, I'll go here inside the style tag and I'll select the h1. I write color, green, yellow, background color, hot pink. I'll save it. I check the result in the browser. Now I'll specify the border. The border has 3 properties. The first one is width. Next we have style. Then we have color. So I'll write border 2 pixels, solid red. I'll save it, and here you go. You can see the border. Okay, so now I'll increase its width to 20 pixels and you can see the results. If you want to specify the border from one side, you can do it with some border properties. So here, for example, I'm writing border left 20 pixels, solid, green, yellow. I copy this 3 times so that I can specify the border from all the sides. Then I can change the side and the colors. So I save it, and here you go. You can see the output. Now, keep in mind that the border width should range from 1 to 3 pixels, otherwise it won't look good. Now, I comment these properties, I uncomment this one, and it's basically the original border that we had. So we'll use a different style. I'll write border 20 pixels, dotted red, I save it, and here you go, we have our dotted border. So this is not looking good. I'll change the style to groove, and yeah, this is slightly better now. Alright, so we can also use the double style, and as you can see, we now have a double line border. So I'll change the width to 10 pixels, and notice the difference. It's much thinner now. It's much thinner now. Alright, so we learned about the different border styles, and I hope that by now everything is super clear to you. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Alright, so let's now talk about the CSS outline. So the outline works exactly like the border, but we can't combine them. So we can either use the properties of border or the properties of outline. The properties of outline and border are similar. So the major difference is that the outline is usually drawn outside the border. Let's have a look at them in VS Code. So here I have the code that we used previously. I'll just replace the border property with the outline one. I save it. We check the result in the browser, and here you go. We have our outline. So now I'll adjust the margin and write margin top 10 pixels. I refresh the page, and here you go. We have our output. If you want to give some space between the text, you can use the outline for that. So other than that, all the properties are the same. Okay, so here we are using this solid, so it will appear like this, as you can see it. Before I used to use the double, so I used it as double. That's why it's showing the double lines. All right, so now I have I'm using like the solid, so it's covering all the area, and basically, yeah, like that's how these properties work. So outline and border are similar, but the only difference is the space. All right, and now on to the next lecture. All right, so let's now move on to another very important topic, the height and the width. So these properties are used to specify the height and the width of an element. However, with CSS, we can easily change the width and the height. They are easily customizable. Alright, so we have the min and the max properties, which are used to specify the min and max height and the min and max width. So let's have a practical look at these concepts in VS Code. So here I have an H1 element. I've written lorem with 10 words. I've given it a color and a background color to it. If I don't do anything, it will take up 100% of the width as well as the default height. So now if I want to add some customizations, I can specify it here and write, for example, height 500 pixels, width 1200 pixels, and take a look at the result. So basically the width covers 1200 pixels and the height covers 500 pixels. So now when I minimize the size of the window, we can see that the scroll bar appears here. In fact, this shows us that the website is not responsive. So you can press F12 to check that. Alright, so let me now just focus on the width. So you'll write min height as 500 pixels and then max width as 1200 pixels. And I refresh the page. Okay, sorry, I have specified it as a height. So I'll write width here instead. And the results are right in front of us, as you can see. Alright, so now as I'm reducing the screen size, the height and the width are adjusting automatically. So yeah, basically that's the purpose. It's that we don't have to use the width and the height again and again in media queries. So yeah, by using minimum and maximum height, we can display anything on our website like this. So here we go, see my width and height are getting displayed automatically because I've told it about the maximum and minimum. So if I remove the minimum from here, my website will be the same as it was before because I've specified the maximum. So if I do minimum here, then the minimum will be, like the following. So it will also be like this. Alright, so it's also showing the scroll bar because I have specified a minimum of 500 pixels, so it will not go down from the 500 pixels, and that's why it has become unresponsive. Okay, so if I write 100 pixels here and put minimum and maximum of 12,000, so it's not showing me the scroll bar, that means that my website is responsive. Okay, so let's move on to the height now. So here I'll write the min height as 300 pixels and you can see the result. The height of the background colors automatically adjusts to 300 pixels. Okay, so now when I increase the content, you can see that the height of the content adjusts itself automatically. So what you have to keep in mind here is that the height of the background color will fluctuate between the minimum height and the maximum height. Alright, let me show you something. So if I specify the max height as 400 pixels, you can see that the content is overlapping. The background color reached the maximum value for the height, and since we have more text than this, the text will go over the limit of the colored background. So now again, if I reduce the length of the content I have, it will look like this. Alright folks, so this is the main purpose of the min and max properties. So let's move on to the next lecture. Alright, so we talked about margins and padding before and about the fact that we use the universal selector to remove them from the website. Let's now discuss them in detail. So the margin refers to the space around the element's border. And the only difference between margin and padding is that padding is the inside area while margin is the outside area. Let's have a look at an example. You can see that a box is drawn here. So this inner part is the content. The area covering the content is called padding. Then we have the border. And lastly, the area covering the border is the margin. So margin and padding are mostly used to set the position of the text. The margin has 4 properties: margin top, right, bottom, and left. And the same goes for the padding. So let's have a practical look at it in VS Code. Okay, so as you can see, we've set the margin and the padding values to 0. Then I'll use the p tag and write lorem in it. After that, I'll use the selector in order to select and style my p element. I specify the color, gray background color, hot pink. Then I write border 2 pixels, solid, yellow. I go to my browser to check the output, and here you go. You can see the result. Okay, so let me now use the h3 tag to increase the size of the content. Here I'll change the selector. So now let me show you like the use of margin and padding. Okay, so here I'll write padding 30 pixels. Okay, don't forget the padding will be applied from the top, bottom left and right unless you specify the area. If we check the output, we can clearly see that the padding was applied to all 4 sides. Now, if I specify the area like padding left and increase the size to 50 pixels, you can see the padding is only applied to the left side. So now, if I increase it more, let's say 200 pixels, the padding will also increase. Alright, so let me do the same thing now with the padding right property. And here you go, you can see the output. So instead of doing it one by one, like left, then right, then again for the other sides, you can simply use the padding property and it will be applied on all sides. However, if you give it just one value, it will be the same for all sides. Okay, so now, if you want different values, you can also do it in a more concise manner. I'll write padding and give different values to the top, bottom, left and right properties, like 100 pixels from the top and 20 pixels from the right and left. And that's pretty much it. So we'll get the same result as if we did it manually and typed the 4 properties one by one. So yeah, it's much faster like this. Okay, all right, so we talked about the padding, like we talked a lot about the padding. Let's now move on and see what the margin is about. Okay, so I'll copy paste this and change the property name to margin instead of padding. I have taken the exact values from the top, right and left, and here you go. We have our output. Now I'll change the left and right values and I'll write 0. So here you go. Take a look at this. We no longer have a margin on the left and right side. Now, if I change the top value to 0 as well, you can see the result. So, as you may have noticed already, margin and padding are used to set the positioning at the beginner level. Alright, so now I'll use the h1 tag and write hello to everyone. Now, if I wanna do use this text to move to my desired position, I can use the margin property to do that. Here I'm selecting the h1 tag, then I give values to the margin, 300 pixels from the top and 200 pixels from the left. And here is the output, as you can see in front of you. So now if I increase the left side to 500 pixels, and here you go, you can see the result. Then to 600 pixels, and you can see the result. Then to 700 pixels, and here you go, we have the result. Alright, now the issue is when I'm minimizing the screen, there is a scroll bar that appears here, as you can see. So we cannot use these properties much often, since the website is not responsive and doesn't adjust automatically to our Windows size. Alright, I hope that you understood this concept of margin and padding, and that everything is clear to you now. Alright, so let's move on to the next lecture. Alright, let's now talk about text alignment. Okay, so what is text alignment? As the name implies, text alignment is used to align our text, in which we use 4 properties. The alignment properties are left, right, aligned, centered, or justified. Okay, so the text is left aligned by default. We can move the text to the right side or to the center, and we can also justify it. Alright, so let's see how this works in VS Code. Okay, so let me first use the P tag and write lorem in it. Then I'll write 20 words in it and copy and paste the tag 4 times. And here you go. Now I'll assign a class to these paragraphs. So I put para1, para2, para3, para4. Then I add the style tags inside the head tag. I'll use the universal selector that we saw in the previous lectures. I reduce the margin and padding to 0. Then I'm gonna put the dot here to specify the class. Then here inside para1 I write text align left. Now I'll copy paste the path and check the output. And as you can see, all the text is on the left side. Now I want the first para on the left, the second para on the right, so and the third one in the center. So I'll copy and paste this. Then I change the alignment of para 3 to center and para 2 to the right side. And here you go. We have our output. Now let's talk about justified alignment. So here I write lorem, then I'll write text align left width 300 pixels. Now I'll add some content in this paragraph. And as you can see, the alignment is not good. Some lines are longer and some are shorter, so to solve this, we'll use the justified text alignment. I'll change the alignment to justify right here, text align justify. I save my file and I then refresh the page, and here you go. It's perfect now. All lines are equal in length, and yeah, that's great. Alright, I hope that the text alignment concepts are clear to you now. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Okay, so we use text decoration to decorate any text in CSS. You might be thinking why I'm saying text decoration. So let's take some properties of text decorations and see how it works. Alright, if I want to decorate the text by underlining them, so I'll write underline. If I want to have some wavy lines in text decorations, then I'll use wavy. In wavy, we have to use underline or line through. Line through is basically used to cut the written text. The line will pass through over a word. Another property for text decoration is none. In none, the text is of blue color and it gets underlined by default HTML. So to apply the property, you can write like none in the text decoration. Now I'll go to my VS Code to show you some practical stuff, like how it works in practice. Alright, so you can see that I'm in my VS Code. First of all, I'll make an A tag, and there I'll type home page and save it. You can see that the text has been displayed. After using the A tag, I'll use text decorations as none. By using the none property, the text will remove the underline. If I desire to make the text underline as wavy, I'll use the wavy property and save it. If I want to make it line through, it can be done like this. You can see after saving, the text has a line through it. Now, if you want the line through to be underlined, then you can do it as above. So that's how we decorate the text in the HTML, like in HTML text. You can also do it like this. Now let's move on to the h1 tag. So I'm writing hello. This is hello. This text is underlined. So I'm going to use the structure of the anchor tag here. That is the text underline. I'm going to save it, and you can see the result. Okay, so I hope that you have understood the way we utilize text decoration property for decorating the text in different ways. Alright, and now on to the next lecture. Alright, let's now talk about text transformation. So when it comes to text transformation, we have three main properties here. The first one is uppercase, in which all the text is capitalized. Then we have the lowercase, in which the text is in small letters. And lastly, we have the capitalize option, in which the first letter of any word is capital letters. Alright, so let's now move on to VS Code and see how all of this works in action. Alright, so let me first use the H1 tag and write hello world. Then I use the P tag and write lorem in it. And here you go. Then I'll use the A tag and write this is a page. As usual, I copy the path. I go to my browser, I paste it, and here you go, we have our output. So now I want the H1 tag in uppercase and the lorem paragraph in lowercase. So for the A tag, we'll use the capitalize property. So let's go back and use these properties. Now I'll write H1, then I write text transform uppercase. I'll copy this twice, then I'll do the same for the P tag and the A tag. So for lorem, we are going to put it in lowercase, and for the A tag, let's use the capitalized property. We'll use the capitalized property for the A tag. Let's save it and we check the output. Here you go, we have the output. As expected, the uppercase property was applied on the first element, which is hello world. Then lowercase for the second element, then the capitalized property for the third element. Okay, now let's add some random text here in the A tag. So this is a capital property. I'll save it, and as you can see, the first letter of each and every word is capitalized, so it's in capital letters. Alright, I hope that the text transformation properties in CSS are super clear to you by now, and that's pretty much it for this lecture. And now on to the next one. Alright, let's now talk about the text spacing property in CSS. So in simple terms, text spacing is just a part of text formatting. It allows us to give space between the text. For example, whenever we visit a website, we can see that some text has larger spaces and some they have lesser spaces, like smaller spaces. So to do these adjustments, we'll need to use some properties in CSS. This will help us adjust the spaces between the text. The first property is text indent. It will specify the points from which the text will start. Next, we have text spacing. It will define how much space is needed between a block of text. Lastly, we have word spacing. This will specify how much space is needed between different words in a sentence. Alright, let's now move to VS Code and see how all these properties work in practice. Okay, so first of all, I'll use the P tag. I write lorem inside of it. I save it. Then I'll write another paragraph and write lorem of 20 words in it. Next, I'll use an H3 tag and write this is a dummy text for text spacing. I'll save this file. Okay, now I'll give an ID to this paragraph. I write para1. Then I go to the style tag and write hashtag para1. Okay, so before we continue with styling, let's check the output. And here you go. This is how our output looks like. Okay, now we'll use the text indent to style the first paragraph, then letter spacing to the second text, and then we'll use the word spacing property for the third text. So I'll write text indent 30 pixels here, and here you go. This is how the output looks like. As you can see, the text is starting from a distance of 30 pixels. So let's increase it now to 100 pixels, and here you go. You see the space has increased as well. Alright, now for the next paragraph, we'll use the word spacing property and write word spacing 20 pixels, and here you go. As you can see, the space between the words is now 20 pixels. Lastly, let's use the letter spacing property on the H3 element. So let's put here letter spacing 20 pixels. Let's check the results. And as you can see, the space between each letter is now 20 pixels. So yeah, like that's too much. I'll decrease it to 3 pixels for now. And here you go. The line spacing is now much better. All right. And now on to the next lecture. Alright, let's now talk about the CSS font family property. So, the font family is used to change the style and font of the text. There are three main ways of using fonts that we will discuss. First, we can import the fonts from Google and link them to our website. All of this inside of VS Code. The second method is to download different fonts from Google and use them on our website. Third, we can also use basic fonts that are stored in the browser by default. Alright, so let's now move on to VS Code and explore these properties in detail. Okay, so here I'll use the P tag and write lorem. Then I'll use the H1 tag and write hello world. Next, I'll use the anchor tag and write this is a page. I'll save the file. Now I'll select the paragraph in order to style it. Okay, I write here font family. So here, as you can see, we have a lot of font styles that are stored here by default and which we haven't downloaded. So I'll use this font style. Just click on it. Here we're using 3 font families which are suitable for different types of browsers. For example, if the first font family, Courier New, is only working on Google and it's not working in Opera, the second font family, Courier, will be used. So now if browser doesn't support the second one as well, it will use the third font family, Monospace. Okay, next, if the browser supports neither of them all, then it will use the default font. Okay, let me now use the H1 selector and pick the font family. I'll do the same with the anchor tag. Alright, so we picked a font family for each of the elements. But before seeing the impact, let's comment these styling lines. I'll now go to the browser to see the default fonts. If you want to check the font family of a text, you will simply have to click on F12, then select the cursor here. Next, we hover over our desired text, and here you go, we can clearly see the font family. Alright, let's now uncomment the styling of our 3 elements. We go back to our browser, we refresh the page, and we can see the output. To make sure that what we wrote in the code is clearly reflected here, let's select this cursor here. So we hover over the elements, and as expected, we have our desired fonts. As you can see, all 3 texts have different font families. So this text is in Courier New, the second is in Lucida Sans, and the third is in Georgia. And all of them are working perfectly. Okay, so this is how you can use the basic font families. Now, if we want to use some unique fonts, we'll go to Google and search for Google Fonts. We'll open the website, and as you can see, we have a variety of font families in front of us. Alright, now, if I want to select this one, then I'll go here and I click on select this style. And as you can see, the font family is selected. You can either use the link or import. Both processes are the same, so the simple difference is that the import function is used in the style sheet while the link is pasted in the head tag. The process of pasting the link is much easier, but I'll show you how to import it as well. So you have to copy this link, go back to VS Code, and you'll have to paste it into the style sheet. Now, if I want to apply this font family to my entire website, instead of these 3 font families that we used before, we can do that by pasting this font family in the universal selector right here. Always remember, whenever you want any property to work on the entire website, you must use a universal selector. Now, I'll refresh the page and okay, you can see that it's not working. Why is it not working? Simply because we have assigned different font families to these texts. So let's solve this problem. I'll go back and comment the font families I gave previously. A simple way of doing that is to select the font family properties, then press Alt, I'll save the file, I check the output in my browser, and here you go. As you can see, it's now working perfectly. Okay, let's now see how we can download the fonts and use them. I'll go to the Google Fonts website and press the download family button here. There is one thing you have to remember. You'll need to keep your downloads closer to the index file, so keep it close to the index file. So the font family is downloaded and you can see it here in front of you. My folder is named Web Fonts. Okay, let's now go back to VS Code and remove the import link. Then I'll write at font face, paste this font family and write the name of the folder, which is Web Fonts. So it's simple. I'll paste the file name here, I save the file, then I go to my browser to check the output, and here you go. As you can see, the font family is working. If I remove the font face, it will still work because the font family has been downloaded. But if I remove it from here and paste it into the paragraph, you can see only the font of the paragraph specified changes. Now, if I copy and paste it from all elements, you can see that it's been applied on all elements. So this is basically how we use the font family on our website. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Icons have a major impact on the website and make it more attractive. Icons help us communicate different concepts and ideas. Okay, so let me explain icons in detail. So here I'm in my browser, I'll go there and open a website called fontawesome.com. Now, there are two ways to use fonts from this website. We can either download the file or use the CDN link. I'll first teach you how to use the CDN link. So first of all, you will write your email address here and click on create and use this kit. Then you will receive a verification email, after which they'll provide you with a CDN link. In case you don't receive the link, you can use the link in the source code attached with this course. Alright, so since I have the CDN link in my possession, I don't need to go through this process. But if you've never done this before, just complete the email verification and you'll be good to go. Okay, so I'll click on the icons and you can see that you have both dark colored icons as well as gray colored ones. Icons can be used for free, but those which are in light color have a paid version. So we don't need them for now. I'll simply pick a random icon. Let's say this one. Okay. Now I'll copy this HTML link. I go to my VS Code and paste it there. Okay, so now I copy paste the path and I check the output. And as you can see, no icon has been displayed. No icon is displayed on the website because I need a link tag for it to work properly. Okay, so what is a link tag? When we don't have any source and we bring it from somewhere and we need to attach it to the web page. We use the link tab. So first of all, I'll copy the CDN link. Here, the CDN link will be used instead of the link. So I already have a CDN link. I can use it. This is the CDN link that I can use. I've copied my CDN link, and this is a kind of, it's a type of CDN link in script form. So, yeah. Okay, so I got this in my email, and yeah, I just need to copy it. All right, so I'll provide this in my source code. If you don't get the CDN link, yeah, like we'll learn how to download it as well. So now I've copied the CDN link. I'll save it, and now I'll go to my browser and I'll refresh the page, and as you can notice, a small icon is appearing here. Alright, so let's now use another icon. So I want to use this one right here. I'll copy the link and paste it into my VS Code right here. Keep in mind that we only need one script tag for all the icons. And here you go, we have our output. So now I want to increase the size and change the color. So I'll go to style sheet and write the class name.fas. Then I'll write color yellow and save it. And as you can see, the icon is now in yellow. We can also increase its font size. So I'll write font size larger and save it. The size has not increased a lot. Let me fix this. I'll change it to 50 pixels. And here you go. You can now see the result. Okay, so now I'll use the second class with the name .fab. I'll write font size 100 pixels. And as you can see, the size of the icon is 100 pixels. Okay, so now if I want to give it some colors, I'll write color wheat, and we can also give it a border. So I'll write border 2 pixels, solid green, and here you go. You can see the border around the icon. So now I want to give some background color. I'll write background color green, and here you go. Alright, we'll download the icons now. So click on the download button here. I'll click on free for web. Okay, so you can see that I already downloaded this, so no need to do it again. Alright, now I'll delete this link, and as you can see, the icons have disappeared. Okay, let me now use my downloaded file and paste it into the link tag. I'll select a folder with the name font awesome. Then I'll select another folder in which there is a CSS file with the name all.css. Okay, I select that, I save it, and as you can see, the same icons are displayed on the website. So this is how you download the icon. You first go to the font awesome folder, select the CSS file, and click on the all folder. Alright, so that's pretty much it for now. And now on to the next lecture. Icons have a major impact on the website and make it more attractive. Icons help us communicate different concepts and ideas. Okay, so let me explain icons in detail. So here I'm in my browser. I'll go there and open a website called fontawesome.com. Now, there are two ways to use fonts from this website. We can either download the file or use the CDN link. I'll first teach you how to use the CDN link. So first of all, you will write your email address here and click on create and use this kit. Then you will receive a verification email, after which they'll provide you with a CDN link. In case you don't receive the link, you can use the link in the source code attached with this course. Alright, so since I have the CDN link in my possession, I don't need to go through this process. But if you've never done this before, just complete the email verification and you'll be good to go. Okay, so I'll click on the icons and you can see that you have both dark colored icons as well as gray colored ones. Icons can be used for free, but those which are in light color have a paid version. So we don't need them for now. I'll simply pick a random icon. Let's say this one. Okay. Now I'll copy this HTML link. I go to my VS Code and paste it there. Okay, so now I copy paste the path and I check the output. And as you can see, no icon has been displayed. No icon is displayed on the website because I need a link tag for it to work properly. Okay, so what is a link tag? When we don't have any source and we bring it from somewhere and we need to attach it to the web page. We use the link tab. So first of all, I'll copy the CDN link. Here, the CDN link will be used instead of the link. So I already have a CDN link. I can use it. This is the CDN link that I can use. I've copied my CDN link, and this is a kind of it's a type of CDN link in script form. So yeah, okay. So I got this in my email, and yeah, I just need to copy it. All right. So I'll provide this in my source code. If you don't get a CDN link, yeah, like we'll learn how to download it as well. So now I've copied the CDN link. I'll save it, and now I'll go to my browser and I'll refresh the page, and as you can notice, a small icon is appearing here. Alright, so let's now use another icon. So I want to use this one right here. I'll copy the link and paste it into my VS Code right here. Keep in mind that we only need one script tag for all the icons. And here you go, we have our output. So now I want to increase the size and change the color. So I'll go to style sheet and write the class name.fas. Then I'll write color yellow and save it. And as you can see, the icon is now in yellow. We can also increase its font size. So I'll write font size larger and save it. The size has not increased a lot. Let me fix this. I'll change it to 50 pixels. And here you go. You can now see the result. Okay, so now I'll use the second class with the name .fab. I'll write font size 100 pixels, and as you can see, the size of the icon is 100 pixels. Okay, so now if I want to give it some colors, I'll write color wheat, and we can also give it a border. So I'll write border 2 pixels, solid green, and here you go. You can see the border around the icon. So now I want to give some background color. I'll write background color green, and here you go. Alright, we'll download the icons now. So click on the download button here. I'll click on free for web. Okay, so you can see that I already downloaded this, so no need to do it again. Alright, now I'll delete this link, and as you can see, the icons have disappeared. Okay, let me now use my downloaded file and paste it into the link tag. I'll select a folder with the name font awesome. Then I'll select another folder in which there is a CSS file with the name all.css. Okay, I select that. I save it. And as you can see, the same icons are displayed on the website. So this is how you download the icon. You first go to the font awesome folder, select the CSS file, and click on the all folder. Alright, so that's pretty much it for now. And now on to the next lecture. Positioning is the most important thing in web design, because if you want to change the position of content on your page, you must know about positioning. And yeah, so that's what we'll see here, because in this lecture we're talking about CSS positioning. So we'll see like how it works and how to use them, and yeah, like basically how it plays an important role in the position of the elements on your website. All right, so in CSS positioning, first we have the static property. It's not a property or position, it's the normal flow of position. It does not have any special work, it's by default. Next we have a relative that works near the real position element. It's closely related to static, but there's not much difference between them. Then we have the absolute property. It's an important property because when you want to move your element, you will use the absolute property. Now, why do we use static as we can give margin and border? Because this concept is used in before and after. Alright, so the absolute property will not work till the given relative parent position. Then we have the fixed. In case you want to fix any element's position, you will use the fixed position. Next we have sticky. It's related to position but used when you scroll your up or down on your website. Okay, so it will fix the position of an element. Okay, so now I'll go to VS Code and make a parent div and take a class of head. So now to create multiple sections, press Alt and select, save it. This will create multiple sections. Copy path and save it. It will show us like this. So for the relative, select parent div and give the position relative. Now we'll select an element and give a class, and then we'll select them and give the absolute, then change their position. Okay, for example, select this third div, give a class third div now. Okay, so I'll go to style tag and we'll give a class head and give a class third div and change its position using absolute. Go to copy path, save it, select the third div, and now we'll change its positioning. So in the previous lectures we've seen that we can change the position of the content through margin and heading, but through the use of absolute and relative we'll use 4 properties: top, bottom, left, right. So now I'll write here top and put 30% and save it. This will show you 30% position from the top. Now if I change the values of top, bottom, left and right, you can give any values to them. If I change it to 100% and save it, you can see that it's going out of the line. So in this way you can change the position. We did the relative and absolute. You can also fix it. I'll select the fourth one and give class for div, and now write in the div position as like use the fix. So do it as fix, save it, its position is fixed now, and yeah, like there is less content, so it's not showing in the right way. So let's add some content. I'll use lorem 2000 words, save it, and you can see that I'm scrolling and it's fixed. So I've used the fixed property here. As you can see, it's like totally fixed. Okay, so in the previous lecture we've used like we used to fix images only, but in this lecture we can fix elements positioning as well. Like that's what we learned. We can fix elements positioning easily. Our next property is sticky. It's closely related to fixed, but the difference is that fixed works according to view point and sticky works according to scroll bar. I'll show you like its implementation. In the fourth div, just change the fixed property to sticky, save it. It will not work here in the fixed property. The content overlaps. I'll refresh my browser. Now no property is working, as I have already told you that to use some properties you have to use top, left, bottom and right. Okay, I'll give it top 0, I save it. It's not showing anything yet, but when I'll scroll down, like when I scroll down, it will show on the top here the sticky position. If we use the fixed property here, it remains there on the element, but in the sticky it removes the overspace. So in this way we use the sticky position. That's basically how it works. All right, when you implement it practically, you will better understand like exactly how it works and how you can play around with it. But for now, we're just showing you the basics. All right, and now on to the next lecture. Okay, so the z-index property is very useful because it helps us remove any overlapping or hidden text on our website. For example, you can see that the image here is hiding all the text, and by using this property, the text now appears on top of the image. Alright, so let's have a practical look at this property in VS Code. So first I'll use the img tag. I'll write the source images and use the image with the name second.img. Then I'll go to the style tag and specify its width and height. Let's say width 200 pixels and height 200 pixels. Okay, so let me go to the body and add an h1 tag now. So I'll use the h1 tag and write hello, this is an index property. Now I want to give a position to the image, so I'll write position absolute and I save it. Let's check the results in the browser, and as you can see, the text is hidden behind the image, So I'll use the z-index property to solve this issue. I go back and write z-index -1. I refresh the page, and as you can see, the text is now appearing on top of the image. Alright, so that's how you can use this property for overlapping texts. And now on to the next lecture. Alright, let's now talk about CSS overflow. So whenever a text is too long and its height or width is limited to a certain degree, we use the CSS overflow property to control the content. And it can have these values. First, we have visible, in which the overflow of text is not edited. The second value is hidden. This helps to hide the overlapping content. Then we have scroll, in which a scroll bar is added to help the user scroll through the overlapping text. Lastly, we have auto, which is almost similar to scroll and only adds the scroll bar when needed. Okay, let me show you the ropes in VS Code. So here I'll use the div tag and write a lorem of 200 words. I'll save it and let's specify its width and height. So I'll write width 300 pixels and height 400 pixels. Now let's check the result in the browser. You can see that the data is not overlapping because we haven't added any background color yet. So I'll go back to my VS Code and here I'll write background color forest green and check the result. Okay, now I want to hide this overlapped data and not overflow the width and the height. So here I'll use the overflow property. You can either use the y-axis one or the x-axis one. So yeah, I'll write overflow hidden. I refresh the page, and do you see how the overlapped data has been hidden? But there is one problem. We cannot read the hidden data anymore. So to solve this issue, we'll write here overflow scroll, and here we go, problem solved. You can see that the scroll bar has been added. So whenever the data is overlapping on a website, this property is used to help the user scroll through the text. Okay, let me write overflow auto, which means the scroll bar will only appear when the data is overlapping. So it's basically done automatically. Let me show you how this works. Okay, so here I'll delete some of the content and save it. Now, as you can see, the scroll bar has not appeared since the content is not overlapping. However, if I give a scroll value here, the scroll bar would still appear. Alright, so that was the difference between scroll and auto for the overflow property. And now on to the next lecture. Alright, let's now talk about the CSS float property. So this property is mainly used to change the position or formatting of an element, and it only has two values, left and right. The element can float to the left using the left value, which is the default one, and the element can also float to the right by using the right value. So let's have a practical look at it in VS Code. So here I have taken a div tag and I'll assign a class to it. Let's say class equals only. You can write any name here, but remember one thing, do not write a name starting with a digit, otherwise it won't work. Okay, so now I'll use the h1 tag and write hello world. Then I'll use another h1 tag and write this is a second h1. I save it. After that I'll go to the style tag. I select the only class and write the background color hot pink. Now I'll go to the browser and paste the link, and here you go. We have our output. Now I want this text to float to the right side. I'll go back to my VS Code and assign a class to the second h1 tag. Let's say class equals sec1. Then I'll go to the style tag and write .sec1. After that I'll write float right and save it. And as you can see, the text has shifted to the right. Now I'll assign an ID to the first h1 tag. Let's say ID equals first h1. Then I save it. Then I'll go to the style tag and write .first h1. Then I'll write float right and save it. Okay, you can see that the property isn't working because I've put a dot, that the basically identifies a class and not an ID. So I'll change it to hashtag first h1. Okay, great. Now the text has shifted to the right. So that was it for the float property. It's a piece of cake, right? Like, it's pretty straightforward, I'd say. Alright, so now on to the next lecture. In this lecture, we'll talk about the DOM model. So what is the DOM model? DOM stands for Document Object Model, which is mostly used in JavaScript to perform certain functions. If we are working on a CSS project, we must have some kind of knowledge related to the DOM model, as it helps when we are using advanced selectors. Okay, so firstly, we write an HTML tag, which is the root element. Then we have the first child element, which is head, and the last child element, which is the body. And these are considered parents of all those tags that are written inside of them. So the tags that are written in the head tag are the title tag, the meta tag, and the link tag. And these three are children of the head tag. Then the tags that are considered children of the body tag include header, section, and footer. In layman's terms, the tags that are written inside a tag are the children tags, and these children tags become parents when any tag is written inside of them. For example, here is a section tag in which there are two tags, one is h1 and one is p. So the selection tag is the parent of these two tags. In a similar manner, if we write any tags in the header tag would become the parent, but it will remain a child of the body tag. So this is how the DOM model works basically. And yeah, so that's the basic understanding and structure of the DOM model. Alright, and now on to the next lecture. There are two things in pseudo. So the first one is pseudo classes, and the other one is pseudo elements. Classes are basic concepts, but elements are discussed and used on an advanced level. So, pseudo classes are used to perform any event. For example, if the user visits our website and works on any element, like he wants to know which kind of effect should be shown on which element and what exactly are we styling if we focus on one specific thing, all of this is done via pseudo classes. So pseudo classes have several subclasses like first child, last child, nth child, and so on. Now we'll try to use all of these classes in VS Code and we'll check the results. So first of all, we'll learn about child. So here I've taken a div tag and I'll give this a UL and make 6 lists in it. I'll save it. Now I'll design them. Here I'll write div ULLI first child. Why do we use these classes? We use these classes so that we won't have to assign a class and ID to every tag. That is why we use pseudo classes, because it also saves our time. Then here I'll write the color green and save it. So the div tag is the body's child, the UL tag is the div's child, and similarly the LI tag is the UL's child. And the LI tag is also the grandchild of the div tag. Now, we selected the first child, which means we want the first child in the UL tag to have a green color. So I'll save it and refresh it in the browser. Now, as you can see, the first list has turned green. So here I'll use another pseudo element, last. Okay, sorry, I did a mistake. It is last child. So yeah, it's the last child. Okay, I'll save it. I check the results and you can see that the last child has been colored. You can also use other properties, like here I'm writing background color gray. I save it. Now it has taken the background color gray. For its syntax, you have to put a semicolon and after that we have to write our pseudo classes. And remember, whenever you will use child, you need to make sure that it should be the child of any element. It should not be a direct parent. For example, I'll copy these li tags and paste them here, save it. Now the green color would not apply to these li tags because they don't have a parent. Okay, so now let me explain. I'm selecting this, I save it. The ul is its child, and it shows all these as a child of it. The reason why I wrote li in ul means that the first child in ul will have this color. This is how we can use it. I've already told you that if we have any child of any element, then the child, the first one, like, will work, and if it does not have any parent, then it will not work. Okay, then we have the nth child property, in which we can select the number rather than giving a class. We can use the nth child and we'll instruct it to go on like to which number. I want the second, fourth, and sixth to be colored, so I'll go there and we'll write nth child, and in the nth child I'll give 3. So now my third one will be colored, and as you can see, it's colored now. So if I want to do this with the fourth or fifth one, then it will color it respectively. This is how we can use it. When we will make a project, like at the end, when we'll build a project, we'll use these classes and elements in it. If you want it in sequence, then you will have to use the nth child. We will use n property, it means 2n. So if you are a student of mathematics, then you know that there is a value in n, which can be 0 or something else. And yeah, like so that's what we mean by n. N will be 0, and when 2 will be multiplied by 0, then the result will be 0. Then its value will be 1, and if we have like 2n, if we're talking about 2n, 2 will be multiplied by 1, and the result will be 2. Then the value of the value of n will change to 2. Then 2, which is n, will be multiplied by 2, like the 2 of the 2n, so the result will be 4, and so on. This is how all the classes are. You can check that they are working automatically. If I increase these elements, I save it. Now see, these classes are working in that sequence. If you write nth last, then it will work from the bottom to the top. I save it. And now, as you can see, it's working from the bottom to the top. You can write any number. I'm writing 3. So now it's working according to 3, according to this sequence. If I write 5, then it will work according to 5. This is how you can use classes. The next property we have is nth of type, which isn't concerned when which isn't concerned whether the element has a child or a parent. So yeah, like here you can see this li tag has no parent, so it's not working. Now I'll write here nth of type 2n, I'll save it, and you can see that the property is not working. I'm telling you why it didn't work. I gave a sequence that goes to div and finds the ul and then finds the ul class. So I'll remove the div tag from here and save it. Now you can see that the property is working. So if you use the nth of type property, it would work on all the tags regardless of who their parents or children are. Then we have another property, empty. This property will only work if the element is empty. So I'll remove this property and use the div tag here. I'll give it a border, let's say border 3 pixels, solid, spring, green. I'll refresh it, and you can see the results because I did not use the property. Alright, now I'll use the empty property. I save it, and you can see that it's not showing any border. So this is because the div tag is not empty and it has different ul and li tags. So I'll remove all the data from here. save it, and I check the results. You can see the border has appeared in this div. So this is how it works basically. Then I'll copy this div tag and paste it here. You can see that another border at the end has appeared. So that is how we use the empty property. Now we're going to use the not property, and this property requires us to assign a class to the tag. This means that by giving a class, we have to tell them that this property should not work here. So not means that the property can work on other elements but not on this element. So I'm going to use the same UL first. We'll write div, then UL, then LI, then I'll remove these UL tags and paste them here. I'll save it. Now, as I told you that this div has UL, and in that UL there is LI, and I said that on LI it should put a border of 3 pixels solid and this color. Okay, so now I wrote background color tan, save it, and now as you can see there is no color shown on it because I did not give anything with not. So I removed not, and so all the elements got the background color. Now I'll use the pseudo class not and putting last li3. I already told you that the name of your ID and class should start with a letter, not with any number, so it should not start with a number. I wrote .li3. This class only works on those li in which there is no .li3 class. So now as you can see it has colored all of them except the third one. This is how we can discard any element basically. So we're almost done with child properties. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this lecture. And now on to the next one. There are two things in pseudo. So the first one is pseudo classes, and the other one is pseudo elements. Classes are basic concepts, but elements are discussed and used on an advanced level. So pseudo classes are used to perform any event. For example, if the user visits our website and works on any element, like he wants to know which kind of effect should be shown on which element and what exactly are we styling if we focus on one specific thing. All of this is done via pseudo classes. So pseudo classes have several subclasses like first child, last child, nth child, and so on. Now we'll try to use all of these classes in VS Code and we'll check the results. So first of all, we'll learn about child. So here I've taken a div tag and I'll give this a UL and make 6 lists in it. I'll save it. Now I'll design them. Here I'll write div UL li first child. Why do we use these classes? We use these classes so that we won't have to assign a class and ID to every tag. That is why we use pseudo classes, because it also saves our time. Then here I'll write the color green and save it. So the div tag is the body's child, the UL tag is the div's child, and similarly the li tag is the UL's child. And the li tag is also the grandchild of the div tag. Now we selected the first child, which means we want the first child in the UL tag to have a green color. So I'll save it and refresh it in the browser. Now, as you can see, the first list has turned green. So here I'll use another pseudo element, last. Okay, sorry, I did a mistake. It is last child. So yeah, it's the last child. Okay, I'll save it. I check the results and you can see that the last child has been colored. You can also use other properties, like here I'm writing background color gray. I save it. Now it has taken the background color gray. For its syntax, we have to put a semicolon, and after that we have to write our pseudo classes. And remember, whenever you will use child, you need to make sure that it should be the child of any element. It should not be a direct parent. For example, I'll copy these li tags and paste them here, save it. Now the green color would not apply to these li tags because they don't have a parent. Okay, so now let me explain. I'm selecting this, I save it. The UL is its child, and it shows all these as a child of it. That's why for making more children we use distractions. Like if you want to make more child elements, we use distractions. The reason why I wrote li in ul means that the first child in ul will have this color. This is how we can use it. I've already told you that if we have any child of any element, then the child, the first one, like, will work, and if it does not have any parent, then it will not work. Okay, then we have the nth child property, in which we can select the number rather than giving a class. We can use the nth child and we'll instruct it to go on like to which number. I want the second, fourth, and sixth to be colored, so I'll go there and we'll write nth child, and in the nth child I'll give 3. So now my third one will be colored, and as you can see, it's colored now. So if I want to do this with a fourth or fifth one, then it will color it respectively. This is how we can use it. When we will make a project, like at the end, when we'll build a project, we'll use these classes and elements in it. If you want it in sequence, then you will have to use the nth child. We will use n property, it means 2n. So if you are a student of mathematics, then you know that there is a value in n, which can be 0 or something else. And yeah, like so that's what we mean by n. N will be 0, and when 2 will be multiplied by 0, then the result will be 0. Then its value will be 1, and if we have like 2n, if we're talking about 2n, 2 will be multiplied by 1, and the result will be 2. Then the value of the value of n will change to 2, then 2, which is n, will be multiplied by 2, like the 2 of the 2n, so the result will be 4, and so on. This is how all the classes are. You can check that they are working automatically. If I increase these elements, I save it. Now see, these classes are working in that sequence. If you write nth last, then it will work from the bottom to the top. I save it. And now, as you can see, it's working from the bottom to the top. You can write any number. I'm writing 3. So now it's working according to 3, according to this sequence. If I write 5, then it will work according to 5. This is how you can use classes. The next property we have is nth of type, which isn't concerned when which isn't concerned whether the element has a child or a parent. So yeah, like here you can see this li tag has no parent, so it's not working. Now I'll write here nth of type 2n, I'll save it, and you can see that the property is not working. I'm telling you why it didn't work. I gave a sequence that goes to div and finds the ul and then finds the ul class. So I'll remove the div tag from here and save it. Now you can see that the property is working. So if you use the nth of type property, it would work on all the tags regardless of who their parents or children are. Then we have another property, empty. This property will only work if the element is empty. So I'll remove this property and use the div tag here. I'll give it a border, let's say border 3 pixels, solid, spring, green. I'll refresh it, and you can see the results because I did not use the property. Alright, now I'll use the empty property. I save it, and you can see that it's not showing any border. So this is because the div tag is not empty and it has different UL and LI tags. So I'll remove all the data from here, save it, and I check the results. You can see the border has appeared in this div. So this is how it works basically. Then I'll copy this div tag and paste it here. You can see that another border at the end has appeared. So that is how we use the empty property. Now we're going to use the not property, and this property requires us to assign a class to the tag. This means that by giving a class, we have to tell them that this property should not work here. So not means that the property can work on other elements but not on this element. So I'm going to use the same UL first. We'll write div, then UL, then LI, then I'll remove these UL tags and paste them here. I'll save it. Now, as I told you that this div has UL, and in that UL there is LI, and I said that on LI it should put a border of 3 pixels solid and this color. Okay, so now I wrote background color 10, save it. And now, as you can see, there is no color shown on it because I did not give anything with not. So I removed not, and so all the elements got the background color. Now I'll use the pseudo class not and putting last li3. I already told you that the name of your ID and class should start with a letter, not with any number, so it should not start with a number. I wrote .li3. This class only works on those li in which there is no .li3 class. So now, as you can see, it has colored all of them except the third one. This is how we can discard any element basically. So we're almost done with child properties. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this lecture. And now on to the next one. So here I took some labels and inputs and I wrote some text in them. You've learned about these concepts in HTML, so by now it should all be very familiar to you. Okay, so now let's go to my browser to check the output. So now we're going to use the pseudo classes properties, and the first property that we're going to use is the focus property. First, I'll write here input focus. This will help the user focus on a specific element. So here I'll write background color hot pink, color indigo. I'll save it, and you can use any property you want basically. I'm just giving you an example. I'll refresh the page, and you can see when I click here, the BG color will change and the text color will also change. This property won't work on these checkboxes. We would have to use another property for that. Alright, so how can this work on the checkbox? So here I'll write input type equals checkbox checked. Then I write box shadow 0, 0, 10 pixels, 5 pixels, red. And you can see the shadow is appearing around the checkbox. The next property is about disabling and enabling. So for example, I want to disable this text section. I'll save it, and as you can see, the color of this box has faded. Now I'll write here input disabled, and then I'll write background color RGB. I'll save it and check the result in the browser. Now you can see this box has been disabled and we cannot write anything here. So you can follow the same steps if you want to use the enable property. Now we'll use the required property. So I'll write required in the password. I'll copy it. I'll paste it here and here. I'll save it. After that, I'll go here and write input required. Then I'll write border 2 pixels solid green and save it. Here I'll use the input selector and write outline none, otherwise the border won't be visible. I'll save it and you can see the results. So the required data is shown like this with a green border, and the optional data is everything else that is not so important, and that is not displayed with green borders. So here I'll remove the disabled property and you can see the result. Now the next property we have is invalid or valid. This helps the user identify the error and like the error they've made while entering any data. For example, I'll fill these boxes, press on submit, and you can see it's showing an error. So this is because I haven't entered the correct email address here. Let me use different attributes to fix this issues. Okay, so here I'll write input invalid, then I'll write box shadow 0, 0, 5 pixels green, and I save it. Now, whenever the user will enter any invalid data, the shadow will appear around this box. So here I wrote the correct email address and the shadow has disappeared. So if I remove required from here and I save it, you can see it will not work. So this is how you can use the invalid property to fix this problem. Similarly, you can use other properties as well, like here I'll write value equals name read only, then I'll go to the style tag and write input read only. After that I'll write color green and background color green yellow. I'll save it and you can see the results. I'll give the red color to the name, I save it, and you can see it here. Now here you can see the color is also applied to the submit button. So I'll go here and write class equals text input, and here I'll write dot text input instead of input. I'll save it and you can see the results. Alright, so this is how you can use different pseudo classes and properties. In the next lecture we learn about pseudo elements on an advanced level. So in the next lecture, prepare yourself to learn about pseudo elements at an advanced level. Alright, and now on to the next one. Alright, let's now discuss pseudo elements and see what they are and how they are used. So what are pseudo elements? We have discussed pseudo classes in detail, and we also tried a lot of the properties we studied in VS Code. Okay, so let's now talk about pseudo elements. The first property is before, which is used when you want to write something before any element. The second property is after, which is used when you want to insert any content after the element. Then we have selection, in which we can select the element and assign properties like font size and background color to the selected element by user. Then we have marker. We use it to change the colors of the dots when we are making list items. After that, there is a placeholder, which helps the user to insert any input and let it style the text the way he wants to. The color of the placeholder text is light black by default. So let's now explore how all these properties work in VS Code. Okay, so here I'll use the h1 tag and write hello world. I'll save it. And then I'll select the h1 tag and write margin 30 pixels, 0, 0, 30 pixels. This means that you have 30 pixels from the top side and from the left side. After that, I'll write h1 colon before. In pseudo classes, we use one semicolon, and in pseudo elements, we use two semicolons. So then I'll write content, hello world. If you don't use the content property here, you won't be able to add any content before or after. Okay, so now I'll give this a green color. You can see that hello is in green color, but hello world is in black because I've used the before property. I'll specify the font size here, let's say 20 pixels, and you can see the results in front of you. Now I'll copy this, I paste it here, and here I'll use the after property. I'll change the content, I save it, and you can see the result. And whenever we use the before and after property, we cannot copy the text. As you can see, if I try to select the text here in order to copy it, it won't be possible. So now let's use the selection property. I write here h1 colon selection, Save it, then I'll copy it, I paste it here. Now I'll change the color to hot pink, background color to indigo. I'll also write font size 30 pixels. Now let's check the result in the browser. And you can see when I'm selecting this text, the background color is also changing and the font size is also increasing. Okay, so what did we do here was just to impact the selection property. Let's now move on to the marker property. First, I'll create 6 lists here. I'll write UL, then I'll write LI and write something in it. Let's say A, B, C, D, E, and F. Then I'll save it, and this is what it looks like. Then I'll write here marker and color lime green. I'll refresh it, and you can see the color of the bullet points has changed. Lastly, let's try the placeholder property. Here I'll use input and write a username. Then I'll go here and write input : placeholder. After that I'll write color : light coral and font size 30 pixels. Let's check the results. And as you can see, the font size looks bigger. So I'll remove this property from here. And that's pretty much it. Basically, these were the main properties of pseudo elements. And now let's move on and talk about other properties. Alright, now let's talk about opacity and about the important rule in CSS. So these two properties are very useful and frequently used in CSS. Let's discuss opacity first. So it's used to increase the transparency of the elements and decrease the depth of color. Then we have important, in which if you have used multiple classes for one element, only the last class will work and the others won't work. In other words, only that property will work first for which you have written important. Okay, so let's now go to VS Code and see how all of this works. So here I'll use the div tag, and then I'll go here, select div tag and write background image, URL, image, /second.jpg. Then I'll write width 100% and height equals 100 VH. Then I'll write background size cover and background position center. I'll save it. I check the result in the browser. So this is what the image will look like. Now I want to add some background color here. So how can we do that? I'll go to the background image and write linear gradient RGB 156.522.1454 RGB 445.555.225. I'll save it and check the result in the browser, and this is how it looks like. Now here I'll use opacity to blur the color and display the image as well. So I'll write RGBA 156.522.154.0.5 and RGBA 445.555.225.0.5. Okay, I'll save it and we check the result. Now you can see the color has blurred and we can see the image. So now let's see how the important property works. I'll use the p tag and write lorem in it. So here I'll use the selector and write color green yellow. I'll remove this part because I don't need it now. I'll save it and you can see the result. Then I'll use another color that is hot pink, and you can see the color has changed. But if I want the previous color to work here, I'll put an exclamation mark and write important. I'll save it and you can see the color has changed back to green yellow. So this is how you can use this important property on your website. I hope this is clear to you now. And now on to the next lecture. Okay, so a border radius is used to fix the radius of a border. We can use different values for that, such as percentage, px, rem, or vh, and so on. This property also identifies the types of corners a border can have. Alright, so let's now see how this works in our code editor. Here, I've taken an anchor tag, then I'll write home and save it. Now I'll go here and use the selector and write width 50 pixels and height 30 pixels. Then I'll write margin 30 pixels, 0, 0, 30 px, and padding 5 px. I'll save it and we check the result in our browser. Now I'll write border 3 px, solid green yellow, save it, and here are the results. I then write text decoration, none, color black, and text transform uppercase, and it will look like this. So now I'll change the background color to blue, and here you go. If I change the color to red, this is how it looks like. You can now read what's inside this button. Alright, so now I add some hover effect here. I write background color, brown, and color, chartreuse. Okay, just pick any color you want, so whatever color you pick, you will get it. Then I'll write transition 0.5 seconds, I save it, and I check the result. And here you go, it's beautifully changing colors when I hover over it. It's also possible to change the color of the border, so we write border 3px solid pink, and as you can see it's now pink when I hover over the button. Alright, so let's now talk about the main topic of this lecture, which is the border radius. So here I'll write border radius 10px, 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 and 10px. The first one is left top, the second one is right top, the third is bottom right, and the fourth is bottom left. I'll save it, and as you can see the edges are now curved. If you write 10px instead of writing it 4 times, it would still work the same way. Now if I write 20px, and you can see the result in front of you. Okay, so now if I can give different values like 10px, 20px, 30px, and 40px. I'll save it, and you can see the result in front of you. Alright, so this is how we use the border radius property, and now on to the next lecture. Alright, so let's now talk about box shadow. So this property creates a shadow around the element, which is similar to the border radius, but it has some different values. So let's have a practical look at it. In VS Code, I'll remove the anchor tag and this part as well. Now I'll use the div tag, then the p tag, and write lorem in it. I'll save it. Next, for the style, I'll write padding 10 pixels. Then I'll go in the style tag, select the div tag, and write width 400 pixels and height 200 pixels. Now I'll write margin 50 pixels, 10 pixels. I'll refresh it, and you can see the output. Okay, so now I'll specify the border radius, and it will only work if you have given a border. So first I'll write border 2 pixels, solid green yellow. Then I'll write border radius 30 pixels. I'll save it, and you can see the result. Now we'll write the box shadow using 5 properties. The first one is right, the second one is bottom, and the third one specifies the blurriness, and the fourth one specifies how much do you want to spread the color. So the fifth one is the color itself. Okay, now you might notice the color is equal from the right side and the bottom, but it's unequal from the left side and the top. So for that, we can reduce the right and bottom values to 0, and you can see the color is now equal from both sides. Usually, bottom and right values are not used frequently. Avoiding the use of it will help equal distribution of shadow color from all sides. So in this way, you can give shadow to box in different colors. You can type value in the box shadow property that includes the value of right, bottom, blurriness, spread, and color of shadow respectively. Okay, so you can also use the hover effect here. I'll copy this and paste it here. Then I'll write div hover and change the color. I'll refresh it, and you can see the result in front of you. Now the color is not changing smoothly, so for that I'll use a transition of 0.5 second, and yeah, I'll save it, and here you go. You can see the result. So that's basically how we can customize the shadow of any element, and that's pretty much it for this lecture. Now on to the next one. Alright, so the grid system in CSS is pretty easy because it helps us in designing our website. It uses both columns and rows to display our content, and one of its biggest benefits is that it can work in 2 dimensions, both horizontally and vertically. When it comes to Flexbox, which we'll see later, we don't have such options. We can either display our content horizontally or vertically. Alright, so here are some of the main properties. First, we have like the grid template rows, which specifies the row and its width. Then we have grid template columns, which specifies the column and its width. Then we have a grid template area, which is not very important, and it only specifies the area. And some of the other properties are grid row gap, grid column gap, and grid gap. These are mainly used to specify the gap between rows and columns. Then we have justify items, justify self, which display our content vertically. Align items and align self that display our content horizontally. Then comes grid row start, grid row end, grid column start, grid column end, grid row, and grid column. So these are the grid properties. Let's now try them in VS Code. Okay, so here I already put some tags. I used the main div tag and I assigned a class to it with the name main. Then I used different div tags here and assigned classes to every tag. Okay, then I used the universal selector to change the margin and padding to 0. So first of all, I'll assign the display property to the main class div. We have discussed this property in the previous lesson. I'll write display grid because we are working on a grid right now. Then I'll write grid template rows, repeat 3 200 pixels, but this doesn't work properly, so it's not working properly because we need to change the width frequently to play around with it. So I'll write grid template row 200 pixels, 200 pixels, 200 pixels. This means I want to have 3 rows of 200 pixels. Okay, then I'll write grid template columns 200 pixels, 200 pixels, 200 pixels. I'll save it and I check the result in the browser, and as you can see it looks like this. Now we'll give them a background color and specify their width and height. So I write the BG color, width and height for all the tags here. I save the file. On a side note, I would recommend you to use Firefox whenever you are working with the grid system because it has some advanced functions. So if you're working with the grid system, better use Firefox. Okay, now I'll open the browser and you can see all the divs have different colors. So now I want to give some space between them. So I'll go here and write grid gap 20 pixels, 20 pixels. I'll refresh my browser and you can see the result. Okay, now I'll show you how you can change the position of the divs. Okay, if I want to replace the A, like the .A div with the .C div, I'll first of all need to understand their lines. You can open the developer tool by pressing F12 and you have to go to grid. Okay, as you can see it's displayed in this way. I'm giving some space from the left. Here I'm giving space, margin left 200 pixels, save it, and now as you can see it's displaying like this. So this is my first column, second column and third column, and their numbers are appearing. With these numbers we can do amazing things. I want to bring div 1 at the place of div 5 and div 5 to div 1. So to do this we'll use properties. Grid column should start from 2 and end at 3. As you can see 2 is from here, 3 ends here. So first I'll write this, then I'll write a row. Row is that one. A row should start from 2 and end at 3. Okay, now I'll go to my VS Code. I went to A and wrote grid column start 2 and grid column end 3 and save it. Then I'll write grid row start 2 and grid row end 3. I save it. And now as you can see div 1 changed its position to 5, but div 5 did not change the position with div 1. It changed with some other div because we did not give that property. So now I'll go to VS Code and we'll copy it and we'll paste the same as it is in the fifth one. Okay, so I'll change the values of property 1, 2, and 1, 2. I save it. Now the div 5 changed with div 1 and div 1 changed with div 5. Okay, so this is how we can change the positioning of any div. We'll increase or decrease the width and height of our divs without using width and height. So how can we do it? As you can see, I have specified width and height to everyone. So I'll go here and comment on it. My row should start from 1 and end at 3, and the grid column should start from 1 and end at 2, because I want to increase its width, not height. Okay, let me tell you how we can make this work. So we call this like spanning, and spanning works when you do not give width and height. So I've given width and height. Okay, I'm cutting it. Now, as you can see, I refresh it. Its height has been increased from 1 to 4. Like when I refresh it, as you can see, the height changed from 1 to 4. So if you want to increase its width, then I'll make its row from 1 to 2 and here 4. I save it. Now we can increase the 6 to 9. First of all, I'll check its lines. If you're facing problems, then you can check line and column by moving it. The sixth one has row 3 and column 2. Now I'll go to the sixth one. Here I'll write grid row, start from 3 and end at 6. I'll write grid column 1 to 2 because I do not work to spanning the column but want to increase its height. Okay, now I'll save it. As you can see, there is no such impact made. So why? Because I've specified width and height to it. Now I'm cutting it, I save it, and as you can see, its width and height have been specified. This is how we can change the positioning. If I want to change the seventh one, then I'll go to 1, I'll copy it, I'll paste it in the 7th. Then I'll remove it. Okay, now I'm checking it like to see what's the row and column. So the 7th one is the 3rd column and the 3rd row. Okay, so I'll write 3. I'll make an adjustment of the column. I should start from 3 and end at 4. I save it, I refresh it. As you can see, its height has been decreased. Okay, so this is how you can span your divs. Now we will discuss our next properties in which we can set the alignment of our divs. I'm removing the spanning of all of them, so I save it and I refresh my browser. And now let's see how I can set their alignment. So I'll go to main, I'll write justify items. We have 3 properties, i.e. start, center, and end. I want to do at center, and for now I'm commenting it because due to the margin left we can't know center properly. So I save it, and as you can see, so the one that I specified the height for, the alignment is stable, and those for which I did not specify the height, they have changed. Okay, so I'm changing the width and height of everything. Now I'm commenting it, and yes, so I'm commenting it as well. If we specify width and height, then we cannot understand the alignment nor how it's working. So that's why I'm changing it to help you understand. Okay, so I save it, and as you can see, they all moved to the center. Alright, so if I do here align the items center, so they will move to the center horizontally as well. I wrote align items center, I save it, and as you can see, they both moved to the center horizontally and vertically. When I'm writing align item and justify item in my div, all of them are working, but what if you want to change the positioning of any one of them rather than all of them? So I delete this, I save it, I'm deleting A, I want to change D, so I'll write align self center and justify self end, save it, and as you can see, my div 4 changed its position vertically and horizontally. It moved to the end by just moving to the center by aligning itself. This is how you can change the position of any div. Okay, so I'm copying it and pasting it here. I saving it and changing only their alignment, start, center. Okay, I save it. Actually, that property is not here, and I wrote it by mistake, so I'm cutting it, I'm pasting it here, I save it, and now as you can see, its property is working. So this is how we can change and align anything, basically. All right. So this is how we can change the alignment of the div and can set it, basically. Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay, so I'll recommend that when you're working on a grid, use a well-suited browser, like the one that like one that is compatible, so that it will be helpful to see your column and row. Okay, as you can see, my column and row here, like we can see them very easily, and yeah, this is how we set our alignment. All right, and now on to the next lecture. Okay, so let's now talk about Flexbox. We mostly use Flexbox to make the layout of a website. So we can either use Flexbox or the grid system or both. In the grid system, we can make rows and columns, but in Flexbox, we can only make rows or columns. We cannot make both. Alright, so as you can see in the example, in this example we have rows or columns. We can make only one column or row. If we work on 2 dimensions, it will not work on there. So now let's see the properties of Flexbox. Flex direction, in which the direction we want to work, and flex wrap, like that's the direction that we want to work with. So when the data is overlapped, and the flex flow, it is the short property of direction and wrap. Flex grow, justify content, align content, is used to check the order and alignment. So we also have order, align self, and align items. Now let's go to VS Code and check the property one by one. Okay, so now make a div and add a class main, and add children, and add different classes. Okay, and the coding is the same as the grid system. Okay, and to change it, first let's check its result on the browser. Can you all see this? It's showing on the browser. Okay, so previously in the beginning of the CSS part, in the beginning, we used the property of inline flex, and that basically, like, this is how it works. So go to main body, write display. Whenever we work, we have to do so in the display flex. So glow, inline, etc. We are working in Flexbox, so write flex, and as you can see, it's working. Sometimes the flex property doesn't work, so we have to give the direction in the flex direction. Okay, so in this one we have 4 properties: column, column reverse, row, and row reverse. Column is the default property and row is not by default. There is one more property, which is row reverse. If we select this, this will show the content in alternative opposite way. Okay, next you have flex wrap. So here, fix the width 500 pixels and height 80 VH. As you can see, the content is stretched all the way. I don't want to stretch them, so the data is completely overlapped, but we want it to be beneath. So for that, we have the property flex wrap reverse. Okay, here I'll use wrap and save it. As you can see, the content automatically set its widths. So if I want to increase the widths, it will set automatically. So there is one more property, that is flex flow. Here, the first property is related to direction. We take in the column, and the second one is used as wrap or no wrap. I'll select no wrap, it will show the result like this. If I use wrap here, it will display like this. Okay, so after these properties, we'll now see how to set alignments. There is 3 properties for this, that are align content, align item, and align self. We will check them one by one. I'll remove some data from here and write something like 1, 2, 3, 4 and save it. I'll give the result like this. I write row there and delete this. It will show me like this. So I'll change its width to 1000 pixels and it will display like this. I'll justify the content. We've read in the grid system that justify content works vertically, so right here right here end, it will go to the end. If I change it to center, it will show in the center. Now I'll use the align item and center, save it. Okay, it will show you in the center. I'll add background color, select color, and it will show this. Okay, now change it to end, it will display like this. If I want to change it to its justify position to start, it will display from the start. Okay, in this way we can display our content. So if you want to move just one property, you can use align set in Flexbox, justify content. So let's move align item and use align self center and save it. It will show you like this one in the center and others. Okay, so align content, the align content property works when you have multiple lines, like in the divs. For example, here I have only one row, and if I have more than one row, then I can use align content to set the width and the height. Okay, now remove this and this one. Let's see another property, flex grow. So it's not this special one, just that it's used to increase the width, and here I'll cancel the width and save it. It will display like this. Okay, I'll use here the flex grow 2 and paste it and just change their values into 5, 4, 1. Okay, as you can see, there is a difference between them due to grow. So it's used to change the widths. Here I've given 2 to the first one. It's showing like this. The second one is bigger, and the third one, then we have the fourth one. It's smaller because I've given 1. By this you can change the width easily without using the width property. So let's move to next property, that is order by width. We can change the position of the div. First remove all and save it. As you can see now, I'll use some more divs, change them and save it. Okay, so as you can see, there are many divs. I can change their position using the property order. Okay, it works as from the less than to greater than. So it starts from -1 and follows the sequence. Okay, so go to G and give the order of -1. The -1 property is displaying on the first one. So now if I gave if I give the order -2, it will display before the -1. So it works in this way, less than to greater than. If I gave the order of 3, then here it will show me like this. Alright, so we've done the order property, the align, the justify content, and other properties, rows and columns in Flexbox. Okay, so what's remaining is only one topic that we'll cover in the next lecture. Alright, let's move on. Let's now talk about media queries. Alright, so media queries are used to make your website responsive. This means that if your website is created on a big screen, you'll also need to make it compatible with smaller screens. And all of this interoperability depends on media queries. So we've covered all the basic and advanced topics in CSS, and media queries is our last topic. We've tried using margin and padding before, but whenever we minimize the screen, the content overlaps. So here we'll learn how to properly make our website responsive. One more thing, if you want to make your website responsive, try using Bootstrap. And the less you use media queries, the faster your website will be. So Bootstrap is a CSS framework. It's a completely different topic, so let's not talk about it for now. Alright, so here we have a few properties like all, screen, print, and speech. And the most commonly used is the screen. Let's have a look at the syntax. So first we write add media screen. Then I open the brackets and write max or min widths. Then we'll write the breakpoint like 200 pixels depending on the screen size. After that we'll open the brackets again and we write all the CSS properties inside. Okay, so let's now have a practical look at it in VS Code. So here I'll use the div tag. I write lorem, I save it. Then I'll go here and select the div tag and write width 300 pixels. You can use any property here. Then I write height 300 pixels and color burly wood. I'll also write background color and font size and save it. So let's check the result in the browser. And as you can see, it looks like this. Alright, so I'll change the color because it's not visible. One thing you should remember is that media queries should always be used at the end of the CSS document, after you've used all the tags. So here I'll write at media screen max width 1100 pixels. I copy all of this and paste it here. I'll remove the height and width and change the color to pink. I reduce the font size as well. Now I check the results in the browser and you can see the content is the same. But the changes will take place when I minimize the screen. So you can see that I've used a breakpoint of 1100. So when I reduce it to that point, the text color and the font size will automatically change. Okay, let me now change the background color and you can see the result. Also, you can specify the minimum width as well. So here I write min width 900 pixels. I save it. Now this property will only work from 900 pixels to 1100 pixels. So I refresh the page and you can see that the color changes only when the width is between 900 pixels and 1100 pixels. Okay, so now I'll copy this and change the minimum width to 700 pixels and the maximum width to 900 pixels. I'll also change the font size. I'll refresh the page and you can see that when I reach the 900 pixel breakpoint, the color will again change. You can use any properties you want. So basically we have some properties for a screen width between 900 and 1100 pixels. Then again, some other properties when the width is between 700 and 900 pixels. Alright, so this is how you can use media queries to fix the layout of your website. We are reaching the end of the course. Now the ball is in your court. I hope that by now everything is crystal clear to you. Alright, and now on to the next lecture. Okay, so in this lecture we're going to incorporate all of the properties of CSS and HTML that we discussed through a very interesting mini project. So be ready. Brace yourself for a very exciting project in which we'll build the homepage of a restaurant. Alright, so first of all I'll create a folder with the name CSS project. Then I go to my VS Code and I open the folder. After that I create an index file. I'll write index.html. Then I create a CSS file, so you can keep them in a folder. But now, as we're working on a mini project, we don't need to do that. So here I'll write style.css. Okay, I then create an image folder as I need to upload some images to use on my website. I'll create my HTML code here. And if we want to give it a title to our website, we can do that by using the title tag. So here I'll write mini CSS project. I save it. I'll go here and create a section. I assign a class to it. Class equals hero img. Then I use the div tag and assign to it a class as well. Alright, so class equals hero wrapper. After that, I'll use the h1 tag and write I love food. I save it. Then I use the p tag and write lorem. Here I use the form tag and take an input. And then I'll use the placeholder property. Okay, so after that I'll use the button tag and use the submit button. I save it and check the result in the browser, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so now I go to my CSS file and use the universal selector. I'll reduce the margin and padding to 0. Then I'll write box sizing border box. Our CSS file won't work because we haven't linked it with the HTML file. So to do that, I'll use the link tag and write the name of the folder. I'll save it and we check the results in the browser. And this is what it looks like. You can see that we have to go back and forth between the HTML and CSS file again and again. So I'll simply put them next to each other like this. Both files are now visible. Okay, so now I'll add some images in the image folder so that I can use them on my website. You can see that I've added some food images here. This is the first one, this is the second one, the third one, and this is the fourth one. Then I go here and select the class. I'll give it the background image, and then I select the URL of the image I want. I save it. Now we'll specify its width and height. Let's say width equals to 100%, height equals to 100 VH. I'll also set the background position to center and background size to cover. Let's save it and check the result in the browser. So this is what the image looks like. This is how we can add and design our background image. Sometimes our image can repeat. So for that we use the background repeat property. So here I'll write no repeat just in case. I'll save it and refresh the page and you can see the result. Now let's try something else. So I'll go to the Google Fonts website to choose a font family. Okay, so I'll choose the Roboto font and copy the import link from here. Then I'll go to VS Code and I paste the link right here. After that, I copy the font family and paste it here. I save it and I check the result on my website. So when I click here, you can see the font family is Times New Roman. Now I refresh it. And as you can see, the font family has now changed to Roboto. Okay, so now we'll see how we can design this text. Firstly, I'll go here and copy the hero wrapper class and paste it here. Okay, then I'll give this a color and position, let's say absolute. Now this will only work if the parent's position is relative. So I'll save it. Then I write top 50%, height 50%. Here I'll use the transform property. I'll comment on this property now and you can see that there is a mistake. So let's check it in VS Code. And as you can see here, I took the height, so I remove it and write left 50%. If you don't use this property, the content cannot adjust properly. But when you use the value in a negative, you can see the document has adjusted automatically. So now let's adjust the font size. I'll select the class and use the H1 tag. Right now I'm creating a mini project, but remember that whenever you're working on a bigger project, you have to assign a class to every element. I haven't assigned the class here because I'm working with some specific elements. Okay, so now I'll write font size 50 pixels, I save it, and you can see the results. Then I change the font weight to bold and text align to center. I save it, and you can see that it has shifted to the center. You can also change the color, so here I give it a red color. This doesn't look that good actually, so I'll change it. Now we'll adjust our paragraph. So first I'll need to select this class and write P. Then I change the text align to center and font size to 20 pixels. I save it and you can see that it looks good now. Okay, I'll increase the font size a little bit and here you go. Now you can see that the background is transparent. That's why the content is not that visible. So I changed the color to white again. Let's change the font weight to bold and this is what it looks like. Okay, now I'll go here and assign a class with the name of form code. Then here I select the class and write display block. This will shift the button below the input. I'll write width 80% and margin 0, auto, 0, auto. I'll save it and I check the result. You can see that there is not much difference here. Alright, so let's now use some other properties. So I'll write margin left, auto, and margin right, auto. And here you go. Then I use the break tag, save it, and you can see the result. Now, we'll select the input and play around with some designs. So I'll change the width to 100%. I'll change margin left to 300 pixels and save it. And this is what it looks like. Now I'll copy all of this and paste it here. I then select the input. Then I write border radius 30 pixels and width 80%. Let's check the results. The width has quite increased, so I'll reduce it to 50%. I save it and it looks fine now. Okay, now I increase the height to 50 pixels, then I reduce the margin to 250 pixels, and as you can see it looks better. I copy this and paste it here again. I'll use the placeholder property here, okay? Then I'll write padding left 30 pixels, and as you can see it looks perfect. Okay, I'll decrease the width to 50%, I save it, and you can see the result in front of you. Now you can see the distance here is very small, so I'll use margin top 50 pixels, and now it looks fine. After that I'll go here and write outline none and border none. I'll save it, and you can see the border is invisible now. Okay, so now let's work on this button. I'll copy this and paste it here. I'll replace the input with a button, so then I'll specify the width and height. I'll save it, and you can see the results. Okay, now I write margin top 30 pixels and text align center. I'll check it, and you can see that it's not working. That it's not in the center. So I'll write margin top 30 pixels and margin left 180 pixels. Now I'll style this a little bit. I want to change the button's background color, so here I'll write background color aqua. I'll also change the font color. I save it, and you can see the results. Okay, now I'll write an outline none and border none. After that I'll change the border radius to 30 pixels and transition to 0.5 seconds. I'll save it, and you can see the results. I'll increase the width to 200 pixels and reduce margin left to 130 pixels so that its position is equal to the input's position. Now I'll copy all these properties and paste them here. Then I'll use the hover effect and remove all of this. After that I'll change the background color to transparent, and I'll save it. I'll give a light color to it. Then I'll go to the browser, and as you can see the color fades as we click on it. So it fades out as we click on it. Alright, so here I'll write border 2 pixels solid black, and this looks perfect. So you can choose any color you want basically. Alright, so we've covered this section. Like we went over the mini project, we learned how to use different fonts, paragraphs, add the background image, and style the inputs. Let's move on to the next section now and see how we can use other properties. So, I've opened my VS Code. Here I'll create a new section and use a class with the name product. Then we'll add a div and assign it a class with the name of product list. Now I'll select images from the images folder and write the source here. After that I'll use the h2 tag and assign it a class as well. I'll add some text here. Then I'll use a paragraph and write lorem in it, and I save it. Now I'll go to my browser and refresh it, and this is what it looks like. You can see the width and height of the image is inaccurate. So we'll go back and specify the dimensions. I'll write width equals 200 and height equals 300, and now the image looks fine. Now I want 3 such paragraphs here, so I'll copy and paste it and save it. I'll select the relevant images and save them. This is how all the images are being displayed now. Okay, we can display these images in various ways. Firstly, I'll use a comment. Then I'll select the product class and write width 80%, margin left auto and margin right auto. I'll save it and check the result in the browser. Okay, so now we'll style the list items. First, I'll copy this and paste it here. Then I'll write float left, save it, and you can see the result. Now I'll write width as 33.33%, and you can see it. You can see it looks much better. So let's design this a little bit. You can change the position of these images to center, and you can see the images are a bit closer to each other. Okay, so for that I'll go to the section and write margin top 50 pixels. I save it, and you can see that there is some distance between them now. Okay, so now I'll use the h1 tag and write product list and save it. Then I use the inline style and change the text align to center. I refresh the page and you can see the results. Okay, so now I want to adjust the margin. So I write here margin top 20 pixels and font size 60 pixels. I save it and this is what it looks like. So we'll style this list a little bit. I'll select the product list and H1 here. Then I change the text align to center. And yeah, so this is not working as I have used the wrong selector. So I'll use H2 instead. I save it and you can see the text has shifted to the center. You can also do this by adjusting the margin. So I'll remove this. Now, I want to tell you one more thing. You can see that I haven't used ID here. Although we have learned about class, element and ID in the previous lectures. And you can see here that I've used class and element, but why didn't I use ID? This is because I didn't feel the need to do so. So I didn't have the need to do so. Now pay attention. You see that I've used different sections here and we can create multiple sections for our website. Basically, yeah, like you can have multiple sections that include head, footer and whatnot. So for that, we use ID in the main parent tag and we can only use it once as it's just used for identification purposes. Alright, so now I'll write ID instead of class here. And here I replace the dot by a hashtag because we're using ID and not a class. I then refresh it and you can see that no changes have been made and everything is working in the same way. So the only issue is that it's preferable to use ID only once as recommended by professional developers. However, we use multiple classes in the div. Alright, so the mini project is now completed. This is how we can design our website using CSS. We simply made a banner, designed it, and then used different list items with images. I hope that everything is super clear to you now. And yeah, like we're reaching the end of our HTML and CSS course. I hope that everything was super clear to you. I hope that everything was straightforward, easy to grasp, and easy to understand and play around with. So yeah, like now, it's your turn to practice, to code, to build websites, and to try new stuff. You really have to practice if you want to go far on your web development journey. So if you want to go far in this exciting journey of web development, then I strongly recommend that you practice, practice, and practice. All right, so that's pretty much it for now. I wish you the best of luck and thank you so much for going through this course. Goodbye and see you soon, hopefully.